chapter 1. These are foundational chapters, I feel. So that once we finish with the foundational chapters, then the other chapters, in theory, should be easier, should be much more familiar at this point. Yeah, after we finish these two foundational chapters. Again, the reason why we are doing 6 and 1 together, it's because in various versions of Gongchik commentaries found in the 12th, 13th century, it seems like the arrangement of the chapters were still very fluid, not fixed yet. So sometimes what's now chapter 6 in this commentary was chapter 1. And what's chapter 1 in the commentary right now is chapter 6. Yeah. So anyway, statement 20 in chapter 6, it says, so people claim that the great meditative equipoise of the bhusuku is the ultimate conduct. And so what that means is that, so there are some who says, you should follow the way that the bhusuku practice, and that is like the ultimate conduct. So Gilbert Rinpoche here says, if a bhusuku were without the 3 dharmas, he would be a sravaka or pratyekabuddha aiming for peace. I think here you could even include one extra word. If a bhusuku were without the 3 dharmas, then he would be only a sravaka or pratyekabuddha aiming for peace. So here, sravaka and pratyekabuddha aiming for peace is referring to how, according to Mahayana, the fault with the sravaka or pratyekabuddha approach is that they are only focused on achieving peace and freedom from suffering for themselves. I think here it's really important that we don't overextend this criticism. And what I mean by overextend this criticism is to actually think of like, oh, Buddha's disciples, Shariputra, Moggallana, Ananda, they were called sravakas. So therefore, they have this problem, they have this fault. I feel that, in doing that, we might be extending too much, too far. Here we're talking about an attitude. The attitude, I think more importantly, more meaningfully for us to understand this is not to read this as like a statement of criticizing someone in the past or some groups in the past or even some groups in the current times, but to look at how, we ourselves, even though in name, we talk about generating bodhicitta, in practice, we talk about, now meditating on bodhicitta, chanting the verses, the section on bodhicitta, that despite doing all of that, what we might actually be doing is still very much the kind of sravaka or pratyekabuddha attitude, or how these words symbolize a particular type of attitude that we might at best still have those faults to think of, and which is to think of our spiritual practice as primarily to just fix our own problems and not have much of a concern beyond our own. Again, in the bigger picture, as much as to be concerned with our own situation and to look into our own suffering and the causes of suffering lies at the root of the path. That we have to do. But here it's saying, but if it stops there, if it is limited to there, then we have strayed away from the ultimate solution that the Buddha offers. And the ultimate solution that the Buddha offers is the attainment of complete Buddha, right? And therefore via the Bodhisattva path. So some general statement for this. Okay, now the commentary. Bhusuku stands for, in Sanskrit, bhukta, eating, shushta or supta, sleeping, and kutara, defecating. This refers to yogis like Shantideva and Mahasiddha who passed their time practicing without any distractions other than these three activities. So sometimes, or rather the original, when this name Bhusuku was first used, it was used as an insult that Shantideva's fellow monks had for him. Because so this past weekend I was able to talk a little bit about this during the retreat, because that Chenrezig practice of the 7 Avalokiteshvara, 7 Chenrezig, sometimes that practice is called the Bhusukuwa, meaning the practice of Bhusuku. But it has 2 kind of meanings being implied in there. So the origins of this name, this term Bhusuku, is that it's found in the life story of Shantideva, right? The author of the Way of the Bodhisattva, Bodhicayavatara. And there it is said that Shantideva came from a privileged background, royalty. And so he was a student and a monk at Nalanda. And maybe because of his privileged background, people were jealous of him, but people could also rightfully point to how, as far as what they can see, he's not doing much beyond eating, sleeping, and going to the toilet. So they don't see him doing much, except for these 3 things. So they call him Bhusuku, the one who walks around only eating, sleeping, and going to toilet. So they meant it as an insult. Now later, of course, it became clear what kind of caliber of a practitioner Shantideva was. Then at that point, the name Bhusuku stuck with him. But now Bhusuku means, this person is such a focused practitioner that the only thing he does other than his Dharma practice are the bare minimum necessary to stay alive. When it's necessary, eat. When it's necessary, sleep. When it's necessary, go to the toilet. All other times should be spent intensively practicing Dharma. This kind of practice. So this refers to yogis like Shantideva and Mahasiddha who passed their time practicing without any distractions other than these 3 activities. However, if they do not possess the 3 dharmas, so here Chodra explains, Kyopa Rinpoche's statement is saying, even for someone who practices so intensely, who practices by truly minimizing distractions down to these three things that are necessary to keep alive, even for someone like that, if their practice is lacking what's known as the three dharmas, then all they are doing is striving for their own release. And therefore, there are faults to that approach. So even if you are so intent in your Dharma practice, but it is not motivated by, it is not done for the purpose of freeing other beings, then you have fallen into this limited way of practicing that is often associated with sravaka and pratyekabuddha. Well, so what are these three dharmas? They are, first, that the disciplined conduct that pays attention to subtle faults is necessary. If this is lacking, the qualities are not obtained. The disciplined conduct must be guarded. That disciplined conduct must be guarded is illustrated by such examples as Acharya Arya Nagarjuna's attachment to the clay vase and Acharya Dharmottara's twirling his walking stick above his head. So referencing these two stories, right? So what are these two stories talking about? So if we look at 627, Sobish provides us the story. The first is that of Nagarjuna, who, when he was practicing the sadhana of a female yaksha, had grown fond of a small round clay vase. When such deities are evoked, for example, as owners of a place on which one wants to build a temple, they are said to provide power, protection, and wealth. So what is this sadhana of a female yaksha? We're not familiar with this kind of sadhana. So Sobish explains that this is a particular kind of practice and ritual related to when you want to build a temple in a particular area, then you want to have sort of, you could say, an understanding with the local deities of that place, so that the temple that you build will actually be of benefit to everyone, be able to fulfill its function. So it says, when such deities are evoked, for example, as owners of a place, Sayi Dakpo, in Malaysia, we call this, the Teju, the owner of the land, the local land. In Hokkien, we call Teju. On which one wants to build a temple, they are said to provide power, protection, and wealth. So if you get their cooperation, then this temple, this place will flourish. Now, due to his subtle attachment, however, Nagarjuna was unable to accomplish the practice because he was, in this ritual, there is I think a ritual item, which is a small clay vase. But he got distracted by that. Right? He became overly fond of that clay vase. So he wasn't able to, in this case, come to a good understanding, with the local deity, which is a female yaksha. The second example is that of Acharya Dharmottara, who was excessively happy about his successful composition of a treatise on pramana, on logic, on reasoning. So he became very happy, when he completed this text, this commentary. Overjoyed, he twirled a walking stick, and sometimes in some of these stories, it's keys above his head, kind of like la 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 la, Usually, he could make 7 flowers blossoming on a dry piece of wood through the power of truth prayer, invoking his pure disciplined conduct. So this notion of by the power of the truth, of some truth that you declare. You say, may the following happen. So apparently he's known for the ability to display results by saying, by the power of the truth, by the power of truth of my, in this case, pure, unblemished disciplined conduct, may so and so happen. But it is said that that morning, when he said that, only 5 flowers instead of the usual 7 would appear. Understanding the reason, Dhammottara removed even the most subtle faults from his pure mental continuum. Meaning this kind of like slight pride. On the one hand, it looks like joy, but there's this pride like, oh, I've completed this great thing. That has hampered the effect of his pure conduct. So that's the 2 stories. Second, a practice that understands the necessity of qualities is necessary. So first, your ethical conduct, your disciplined conduct needs to pay attention to even the most subtle faults. Don't say, oh, it doesn't matter. Now, again, I think realistically, maybe at the beginning, you don't want your practice to be so tight. Then you become very claustrophobic. You become very too tight. So you have to let loose a little bit. But in letting loose a little bit, you also need to understand that it's not like, letting loose will eventually lead to Buddhahood. If that was the case, then we are all Buddhas by now. We for the most part, let loose everything. Our letting loose right now is done on the basis of understanding that if you begin, with too tight, you might derail this larger process. You might, like sort of the example of, weight training in the gym. If you go in with too heavy the weights, tear a ligament or even injure your back, then it's very hard to be motivated to go back to the gym to continue to train. So you have to lift progressively at the weight over time. So that's the first, being very careful with all the subtle, even subtle faults. Second, it's also necessary to have this dharma of understanding the necessity of qualities. Having obtained pith instructions and permission through an authentic guru, an excellent special observance is necessary that relies on solitary places and so forth and accomplishes the practice. So you need to know why these qualities are necessary, why practicing under quiet conditions, solitary conditions, conditions that are lacking, that are relatively free from distractions is necessary. You have to remember that. Third, a practice of benefiting others that is fueled by boundless compassion is necessary. Apart from aiming to benefit others through the firm promise to not abandon sentient beings under any circumstance and accomplishing their benefit, one is not in the least concerned about one's own benefit regarding body, speech, and mind. So bodhicitta. If these 3 qualities are lacking, however good one's accomplishment or however good one's practice, it is only like the sravaka and pratyekabuddha's limited peace. Therefore, since these 3 comprise a method that is indispensable, capable cause for accomplishing Buddhahood, it is by all means very important. Furthermore, this is like the Siddha Luipa, who actualized the disciplined conduct of a definitive meaning, which is free from a thing to be guarded and a guarding. Furthermore, he knew emptiness as cause and effect, had the strength to accomplish the benefit of others, and through emptiness and compassion, he took care of others. These 3 dharmas were truly complete in him. Moreover, it is clear in his writings that Acharya Shantideva also possessed these three qualities. Furthermore, since the accomplished excellent masters ably possess these three dharmas, they have accomplished the twofold benefit. Moreover, for ourselves too, if we do not possess these three dharmas, even though we think we are perfect, we will not become useful tools for the accomplishment of the twofold benefit. Therefore, the intention here is that these three are by all means of great importance. Paying attention to even the most subtle faults. 2, always understanding why these qualities are necessary, the qualities that support our practice, the qualities that minimize distractions, why the qualities of such conditions are necessary, and therefore strive to put yourself, to surround yourself with these conditions. And thirdly, that your practice is fueled by boundless compassion for all beings. So these three dharmas are necessary. These three dharmas are also mentioned in the 7-point lojong, in the precepts section, I believe. Never to be separated from the three. And these are the three. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Any questions about or comments about this statement? So with this, we finish the chapter 6, the 20 statements in chapter 6.
I would think that the first of these three, paying attention to the subtle faults, would not necessarily be exclusive to a Mahayana path, but that it would be a part of the sravaka and pratyekabuddha piece.
When it's talking about the faults of sravakas and pratyekabuddhas here, it's not talking about these problems. It's talking about lacking in the great motivation. Yeah? And this statement is not, again, not really just talking about the faults of the so-called faults. Like I said, I don't think we should think of it as the actual sravakas, actual pratyekabuddhas have these faults. It's like the straw man that Mahayana sources kind of present as the problem with sravakas and pratyekabuddhas. Here, it's also related to the notion of bhusuku, which is the first notion of bhusuku. Seemingly, this person, does nothing but eat, sleep, and defecate. So it's also saying, if you just eat, sleep, and defecate, and you're actually not paying attention to the subtle faults, then you're stuck. And the other connotation of bhusuku is, so one connotation of bhusuku is kind of carefree, simply does what one likes. And being carefree and simply doing what one likes is also related to then the idea that minor faults are not important, first. Second, I have all the qualities already. I don't need to develop. So that's why the three dharmas, the first two, is addressed to this superficial meaning of bhusuku. The third dharma is addressing the intended meaning of bhusuku, which is someone so focused. So meaning, even if you have the first two dharmas, very focused now on even the most subtle faults, very clear that all the Buddha qualities are necessary to develop. However, lacking the third dharma, doing it for the benefit of beings, then at best, this only leads you to sravaka and pratyeka. And that would be a fault. Again, these teachings, don't fall into the trap of the pandita and think that it's debating other people. It's to investigate our own mind. And some days we think we are bhusuku, even if we don't use those words. In a sense of like, I'm a great practitioner. In fact, when we hear the story of Shantideva, so whenever we hear the story of Shantideva, we already know, right? He's a great guy. So then we hear about how his colleagues perceive him as bhusuku, right? And when in fact, he's a great practitioner. Right? And I can tell you, sometimes we think we are like that, especially when we perceive people to criticize or think our dharma practice is not serious enough. On some subtle level, we might think, well, I'm like Shantideva. Maybe not in those exact words, but somewhere lurking back there, you're like, I'm not like you guys who need all these. I'm fine. But here is saying, well, you be careful. Don't use this to protect your afflictive emotions, and say, well, I'm practicing like a bhusuku. You think I'm not practicing, but I am. So here, this point here is like, are you or are you not? Well, you take these three dharmas and you examine. If you perceive, someone, whether random someone or someone that you label as a guru, to say or do something that seems to say, you're not paying attention to these subtle defilements. We might kind of respond, from our mind, maybe not with our mouth, like, oh, well, I'm really practicing. You just don't know. Then here it's like, well, look at these three dharmas. Are they there or not there? If they are there, then you are truly bhusuku in the Shantideva sense. Then good, very good. But if they're not there, then forget about the faults of sravakas and pratyekabuddhas. Yeah? You're nowhere close to even a faulty sravaka or a faulty leaky pratyekabuddha. Chapter 1, verse 29. Verse 28 is the one that says the four immeasurables, yeah, they are the essence of what Buddhas are. Refuting some ideas that the four immeasurables are states of mind that, though very noble, though no doubt better than anger, attachment, aversion, things like that, are nonetheless still samsaric. Because in the discussions about the higher realms of the God realms that you can be born in the formless realms, of which there are divisions into 16 kind of further divisions. So in the formless realm, formless God realm, which has 16 subdivisions, it is said that you arrive at the 16, which is divided into 4, when you practice any of these immeasurable minds. So another name for these immeasurable minds is the Brahma dwellings. So the deities of the form realm, pure form realm of the God realms. Within the God realm, there are 6 plus 16 plus 4. So altogether 24. The God realms are actually further divided into 24 levels. The first 6 levels belong to the realm of the senses. And we are part of the realm of the senses, sensorial realm. But the 6 that we're talking about are those in the God loka, God world, but it's part of the sensory realm. Then above the sensory realm, there are 16 of the what's called the rupa loka. You could say literally form realm, but it's not ordinary form. Yeah, it's like pure form. And then there's 4 formless heavenly realms. So in discussions of these levels of heavenly realms, each of the 4 immeasurables, love, compassion, joy, and equanimity, is associated with the 16 form realm divided into 4, 4, 4, 4. So briefly, like the lowest of the 4 is arrived at when you successfully cultivate greater and greater loving kindness. Then the next 4, greater and greater compassion. Next 4, greater and greater joy. And then the top 4 of these 16, greater and greater equanimity. Then if you further refine your mind, then you could be born in the formless realm. The highest of the formless realm is called the heaven of neither perception nor non-perception. So these are like the Abhidharma especially would elaborate on this. So as a result of this, because the form heavens are associated with the 4 immeasurables, there is the idea that the 4 immeasurables are ultimately to be transcended. But here, Kyoba Rinpoche makes the point that no, actually, Buddhahood, the essence of Buddhahood are the 4 immeasurables. So last time we discussed about this, and also we discussed about how, especially I remember Leonard sharing this this experience or sort of have encountered among certain meditation teachers of present time teaching. They actually say you practice love, metta at first, then to be replaced by compassion, then to be replaced by joy, and then to be replaced by equanimity, that you leave behind these love, compassion, and joy, and to arrive at equanimity is where you want. And then from equanimity to full equanimity, I suppose, to the state of Buddha. So there are conceptions of Buddhahood that are like this. But Kyoba Rinpoche says that's a mistaken view. So that's statement 28. And again, you might think, oh, this is all abstract talk. But well, if you have walked around in the Buddhist block long enough, you will see these views that color the way people practice. And these are faults that we have to overcome. Yeah. Then statement 29 here, it says, people claim that the three vehicles are ascertained as three different causes, paths, and results. So the three vehicles here is not what we, especially in the West, and then because people are now written or reading, even people in Asia are reading books that were composed and written in the West, whether by Tibetan Rinpoches collaborating with their Western students or their Western students who are now teachers themselves. In the West especially, when we say three vehicles, we are thinking, Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana, right? That's something that really is Trungpa Rinpoche kind of coining these three. There are related threes like this, but it's not about yanas. It's about vows. So we have the individual liberation vow, we have the Mahayana vow, Bodhicitta vow, and then you have the Vajrayana samayas, called the three vows. So three vows is a way of dividing Buddha's teachings more commonly used than three vehicles. When three vehicles are used in Tibetan material, they're talking about the sravaka vehicle, the pratyekabuddha vehicle, sravaka Buddha vehicle, pratyekabuddha vehicle, and complete Buddha vehicle, or bodhisattva actually vehicle, the three, arhat, or not arhat, but sravaka to be more exact, sravaka yana, pratyeka yana, and bodhisattva yana. The Lotus Sutra most clearly lay out these three yanas. So there are those, so again, in the Nalanda tradition, in coming up with more sophisticated and more systematic presentation of the path of the Buddha Dharma, many of the great scholars have explained these three yanas as saying, well, the cause for this yana is this, the method, meaning the path of this yana is this, and then if you do this and practice this, then the result is this. So one for the sravaka, one for the pratyeka, and one for the bodhisattva. So the idea then is that there are three ways to be free from samsara. Here, Kyoba Rinpoche says, no, there's only one single vehicle and one single family. Family here means potential. So even in like Jewel Ornament of Liberation, right, by Gampopa, he begins at the very beginning. He begins by talking about, according to the sutras, there are 5 families. Families are very literal translation, but basically you can say spiritual potentialities. He says, in terms of people's potential, quoting sutras, the Buddha says that there are 5. But here Jigten Sumgön says, no, actually, only one single family. So anyway, from the jewel ornament, the 5 are the first 3 that we've already talked about, the sravaka, the pratyeka, and the bodhisattva. Then what are the other 2? Let's see how many people remember these things. What are the other 2? The other two families. No cheating, okay? What are the other two?
Like the cut one?
The cut off, yes.
Cut off, and the one that switches.
Indeterminate, yes.
Determined.
Yeah, indeterminate. You almost feel like the cutoff and or the indeterminate. You almost feel like the indeterminate is there as a catch-all, you know, in case, you know. Then the most challenging one is the notion of the cutoff. You know, like what? There are beings whose spiritual potentiality is cut off, that they will never become Buddhists. You know, it's like whoa, you know. And interestingly, this notion of cut off, you know, is not appearing in so-called Hinayana teachings. It's found in Mahayana texts, talking about those who are cut off. Generally, we say in Mahayana, we say everybody can become Buddhist, but there are passages in certain Mahayana sutras that say there are these who are cut off, you know. Anyway, in the jewel ornament, Gampopa actually, after presenting these five, he says, I will paraphrase him. He says, relatively, you can look and say, yeah, there are these five, but ultimately it's one. So now, again, I think you might think, oh, this is just these guys doing these ways of like accounting for like differences and wanting to come up with something that makes more sense. Or I think then, you know, if we think only in those terms, then we are wasting our time. Then we are becoming experts of Indian philosophy 1,000 years ago, rather than Dharma practitioners. As Dharma practitioners, I think when you look at the notion of the five families, it is a way for you to refine your own mind, regardless of whether they are truly cut off or not. You might find yourself at a time where you feel like you're giving up. This is pointless. And that is when you're feeling like you belong to the cut off family. But interestingly, cut off family is still a family within those training for Buddhahood. So I think at that time is to recognize, like right now it might feel like it's cut off, but the ultimate vehicle is the Buddha vehicle. But you need to refine. So you go from cut off to indeterminate, to sravaka, to pratyeka, and then to bodhisattva, and then finally understanding, no matter what potentiality you are, we all are the single family, the Buddha family, and we all ride on the single vehicle, the one complete vehicle. So single here, the word single, chikpa, right? I've mentioned when we're looking at the title Gongchik, I would say the single is not an exclusionary single, but rather a inclusionary single. When we say things like, you know, everything is one, usually what this might mean is that it's a unifying view of one. Everything is one. But this statement could also mean, actually, everything is one, which is this, and then other things are not this, and therefore they are not real. That is more like, you could say, monotheistic tradition will say God is one, everything else isn't God. A more mystical would be say God is one, and therefore if there's only one, what are we? We must be also part of this one. So this is closer to the one, the single that we're talking about here. The single family is the single family that encompasses all of them. The single vehicle is the single vehicle that encompasses all of them. So as I say, it's not according to Kyopa, then it's not that there are 3 possible ways to become free. You can take the sravaka way, you can take the pratyekabuddha way, you can take the bodhisattva way. In fact, no matter which way we are taking, it's skillful means that the Buddha taught in order to lead us into the single family, the single vehicle, the Buddha family, the Buddha vehicle. The commentary here gives us more, I think, it doesn't really, in my opinion, necessarily address how it's one, but more quoting sutras that for Chodrak's audience is of great importance. But for us, we might be like, well, I don't know, these sutras, I don't even know what they are. So if you quote them, I'm like, yeah, maybe, right? But here, for Chodrak's audience, to be able to quote these sutras, various sutras, to point out how they are all saying, in reality, there's only one Dharma to accomplish. There's only one goal to reach, as a way of showing to his audience, his reader, that this is the final intention of the Buddha. So he quotes in the commentary 163, the Sabdharma Pundarika Sutra, which is the Lotus Sutra, teaches the same point through the example of the guide who, through his skillful means, magically manifests villages in the solitude of the plains and so forth. So this is the story in the Lotus Sutra where this guide who is leading his people into ultimate safety, away from danger. But along the way, when the people he's leading were losing courage, losing strength, thinking they will never arrive, it said that he magically manifests villages in the solitude of the plains and caused them to feel, oh, must be right there. So when they got there, they were able to rest. They were, oh, we have arrived at this promised land, Then eventually he dissolves this manifestation and he said, okay, actually it's further ahead. So in this way, leads them. So here is a classic way Mahayana explained how even though the goals of the sravakas and pratyekabuddhas were taught by the Buddha, they were taught for this same reason, so that people don't feel discouraged when it gets too tough, and say, yes, you can just work on your own mind, settle into your own peace, settle into your own equipoise, your own stability. And that is really what the goal is. It says that when Buddha seems to be saying that, he is saying it just so that those who are losing strength, losing faith, losing confidence can have a break, but that eventually they will be led to the final goal. So this is statement 28. And I think, again, more importantly, is to recognize that it's not like, there are different ways to become free, and you choose. This notion of like choosing, I think on the one hand, there is a lot of appeal, like, oh, there's 84,000 dharmas. You can choose which one you want to practice. I don't know about you, but at least for me, when I hear that, what it causes in me is, okay, I will choose. Then you choose one, right? You think, oh, I'll choose this one. After practicing a while, you think, oh, maybe I chose the wrong one. Let me go choose that one. Then you practice a while, you're like, this one is not working out. Let me choose the other one, right? So on the one hand, it sounds like, oh, great, this is not like Christianity. Only one way, gosh. Yeah. Accepting Jesus Christ or not, obedience to Allah or not, loving Krishna or not. Just one way, right? You think, oh goodness, I'm glad I'm not in that tradition anymore. This one I can choose, also like idams. Oh, there's so many idams I can choose. The problem with choosing too, for me at least, I don't know about you, it's like you start to second guess, oh, well, maybe not this, well, maybe not that, right? So Kyopa's way of talking about the 84,000 is that the 84,000 are all the elements that are brought together as a single path for the single family towards the state of Buddha. And when you understand that, then, yes, practically speaking, right, at any given point, you are only doing one practice. Sure, yes, sure, you're still doing one. Like this session, I'm doing samadhi empowerment, right? You can say, okay, I'm doing one practice. But now, doing this one practice doesn't have to be, oh, I'm choosing this over all the other things. But rather, this is one that is one of the conditions that I'm gathering for the same purpose. Tara, another condition. Lojong, another condition. Mahamudra, another condition. So all of this now, they do not need to compete with each other. Same, when people say, should I do one practice? Should I do 3 practices? Oh, some lama says, some guru says, you should do one and only one. I mean, there is a reason, when a teacher tells a student that, it's particular maybe to the students. But unfortunately, sometimes I feel that kind of advice will also lead people into this mindset, like, I just need to find that one practice that will make it all work for me. And I think that leads to a lot of instability. So there is this approach of Gyalpa Rinpoche, which is every practice that you do, becomes a condition, becomes a part of these causes and conditions for the single path to Buddhahood. So likewise in the Lojong 7 point, right, it says that when all practices converges on a single point, when you feel that way, when your attitude towards all the different practices converges on a single point, which is bodhicitta, then you know you're making progress. So that statement and this statement is intended the same. The intended meaning is the same. Yeah. Any questions, comments?
I have a question.
Yes.
What is the relationship of an arhat to those 5 families? In other words, can an arhat be a
Arhat is
pratyekabuddha?
often used as a synonym for sravaka.
Really? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sravaka and arhats are often used interchangeably. Sravakas are literally hearers. So historically, this term referred to the Buddha's immediate disciples. They were the ones who heard the teachings given by the historical Buddha. Then later, this category of sravakas gained its own kind of significance. And I think in the early period, sravakas don't really designate like a different category necessarily, but was just used as, those who listen to the Buddha's teachings and achieve freedom through that. As opposed to Buddha Shakyamuni, who did not listen, who did not study with anyone, at least within that lifetime, who did not study with another Buddha, but became what they call the one who rediscovered the path again. Last Vajra statement of chapter 1. So beginning with what other people say. Sravakas and those who have a craving for the perverse do not attain Buddhahood. And to be a sravaka has been taught as a permanent obstacle. So to maybe many of you, you're like, what? That's very mean. To put sravakas and those who crave for the perverse together, that both of them will not attain Buddhahood. Again, this has to do with, there are certain Mahayana sutras that really, use the straw man of the sravakas as something to be completely avoided because they are so quote unquote self-centered. And if they're determined to only for their own peace, to work for their own liberation, then once you start off with that mindset, then you might as well be condemned to never becoming a Buddha, because your self-cherishing has now, in a way you can say, being painted over by this spiritual gloss. So then you will never get out. So this is how strongly some of these Mahayana sutras would kind of beat up this notion of a sravaka, so that even they say, they are like worse than even the cutoff sometimes in some texts. Very strong words like this. So then it has led some people into thinking, oh yes, once you become a sravaka, you are done, you are finished. Here, Kyöpa Rinpoche says, no. This is not a permanent obstacle. So he says, even the totally depraved, on the one hand, and the sravakas, which it's not him saying, but there are some Mahayana sutras that seem to say those who take the sravaka way is worse than even the most depraved, meaning like worse than Hitler. You're like, what? Right? So, but here he says, even whether you want to talk about Hitler or you want to talk about sravakas, and if you think sravakas are worse than Hitler, they all will finally achieve the state of Buddha. This is the last statement for the first chapter. So here, again, the commentary basically quotes all these different quotes to show that, the Buddha intended, even when the Buddha spoke very strongly, seemingly criticizing this goal of the sravakas for their own personal liberation from suffering and no concern from others. Yeah, it says, even when the Buddha spoke very strongly like that, that is not like his final, this is not a final statement. It says that necessarily. So this statement 30, you could say, is almost like an afterthought of statement 29. Afterthought in the sense of, in case you still have lingering doubts that all beings are members of the single family, all spiritual paths taught by the Buddha are part of the single path. In case you still have some wrong understanding regarding this, by the way, even those who in the Mahayana Sutras are painted as stuck. In fact, that is not really the case. This is what 30 is saying. Any questions, comments about this? Again, try to remember. They're not talking about, okay, actual sravakas, actual pratyeka. In fact, even if they are, it's meaningless to you and me. Always with this, it's like how to turn this around and say, how can this serve, as a way to protect myself from wrong understanding, wrong view with regards to my own practice. And for me, this statement also, I think, works when you're honest about it. Sometimes you feel like you are one of these, the totally depraved, or, the sravaka in the negative sense. But to know that, actually, Buddha has taught that even for these, the final goal of Buddhahood is possible. And then if we see someone and we think they are totally depraved, or we see someone and we think their approach to spirituality is extremely self-centered, right? Even that, we do not give up on them because we know actually these are not permanent obstacles. There's no permanent obstacles. Especially, I think it's easy to kind of think, oh, this person is so beyond help. But no. Any questions, comments? Thoughts? I'm just seeing there are some chat. Usually I'm not able to see what's in the chat because my computer is far away. So anyway. I have a slightly different setup in terms of the Zoom. This is over the weekend. As I said, I needed to go on vacation from that side of my living room to this side of my living room. So I used some frequent flyer miles, and I'm having my vacation from the usual staging site. Well, if no questions, then we have completed chapter 1 and chapter 6. And we continue at this point to chapter 2. Then the rest is pretty linear, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2 is the chapter on the statements all pertain to dependent origination, a very key topic, Kyoba Rinpoche's focus on the Buddha's teachings. Then then chapters 3, 4, 5 is the 3 vows. The chapter on individual liberation vows, the chapter on the training of bodhisattvas, and the chapter on the observance of the mantra holders, meaning those, the secret mantra commitments. A chapter on dependent origination, there are 15 statements, a fairly short chapter. So we will begin on Wednesday in chapter 2. Read ahead, so that you don't wait until class, to like first time be reading it, and because it's hard to catch all the nuances. And then, so hopefully we can cover more ground now that we have a good grounding in chapter 1 and 6. The 2 key chapters. One thing to mention, so there are always opportunities to get involved in different things and to do different projects. Somebody over the weekend during the Avalokiteshvara practice said that they were looking for an image of the that corresponds with the 7 Avalokiteshvaras in the Namchu cycle. They're looking to see if there are any images of this practice, any tanka. And I said, as far as I know, there are no tankas that have been painted like this. And so then I said, well, if you want, you could commission a tanka to be painted according to the description found in the Namchu Avalokiteshvara text, where each of the Avalokiteshvara manifesting from the 6 syllables into the 6 realms have different colors, and then their secondary right hand holds a different object, right? The Veena for the God realm, the sword and armor for the demigod realm, the mala, like the central one, for the human realm, a book for the animal realm, a treasure chest for the hungry spirit realm, and then fire and water for the hell realm. I said, well, you could always commission a tanka like that. So if anyone is interested in this project of commissioning a tanka, you can let me know, or if you all know Magda in Mexico, you can also get in touch with Magda, and maybe Magda will get in touch with the other participants and see. I'm just thinking out loud because I got some messages about this, and so just sharing with you all. And those of you who want to participate in the Vasundhara Puja, you have already contacted me, so I'm going to tally up the total of that and then find a way to send it to this Newari friends that I have in Nepal. So the Newari Buddhist community is a Vajrayana-based community, but in some ways their Vajrayana is different from what we are more used to in the Tibetan context. But I think the Newari ritual forms and the way they perform their pujas is probably closer to the Indian Mahasiddhas way and time. So something to kind of, I feel it's good to support that. The Newari Buddhist community obviously don't have superstar teachers and lamas and gurus. So beyond the Newari community, they are not that well known. So these offerings that I intend to send over, it's just a small to make a connection, to rejoice in what they're doing that day. Now because of the interest in Tibetan Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhists living in Nepal in great numbers now, it has caused, so interdependence, a resurgence of interest in Buddhist practice, Buddhist training among the Newari community. So they have been inspired to also take seriously their own traditions. So that you are seeing a revival of this. I shared a video where this is an elderly gentleman. He's not the teacher, but he is participating in these Zoom classes on how to do and how to practice the sadhanas. And you can see from there, they have a rich mudra tradition, the way this mudra practice, meaning the gestures in the Tibetan, the way it has developed and transmitted to Tibet is, I would say, much more like conservative, right? And so our mudras are, kind of like limited to here, then forming the different things and, things like that. But when you look at the video that I shared, they are making instead of 8 offerings, it's the 5 offerings, argam, padyang, it's much more. It's like it goes back, then down. And then this one, I remember the incense, they go this way. Which is kind of, you can see more vividly, So because the Newari Buddhist tradition has, it's grounded still in South Asia. And these mudra tradition is related to classical South Asian, Indian, Nepali, Newari dance traditions, dramatic tradition. So in South Asian drama, when the characters come out, their mudras are actually a language they're speaking. So as they do the dance, they are communicating words that the audience know how to read. So mudras actually share that commonality. But the way mudras are now done in like Japan, China, Tibet, it's a much more limited range. But the Newari one, it's very expressive. So anyway, thank you for those who have reached out and say you want to make a connection to that. So, and the Newari community, they don't have like big temples, big monasteries. They are not a monastic tradition. The way their Buddhist practice have evolved is very family centered. So then, of course, some Buddhists criticize and say, "Oh, what happened to the monks? What happened to the monastic community?" They don't have a monastic tradition. They have a family-centered practice. So these offerings sent, I'm not exactly sure how they're going to use them, but my understanding is it's not even for donation to people, but rather to help them buy the offerings. And so it will be spread out to, and it's for this one particular puja, the Lady Vasundhara, the consort of Jambala. So it's the qualities of abundance and generosity. So once a year, the Newari community does this Vasundhara puja. So now in lockdown times, the puja will probably be done in a very small scale among families. So I've asked this Newari friend, I say, if I send you, some money, can you please disperse it among your community so that I can participate in Vasundhara. We have a connection to Vasundhara at Urban Dharma because in our 5th anniversary celebration, we focus on the Vasundhara practice. There is a unique sadhana that is that was composed by Choki Drakpa, the one who wrote this commentary. Dhammakirti wrote a unique, I find it unique, Vasundhara sadhana, because here Vasundhara is the Lord of the mandala, or the Lady of the mandala. So she appears at the center of the mandala. More typically in these mandalas, when a female deity appears in the center, then what appears, right, in the four directions are also female deities, goddesses, or dakinis. That's more typical. But in this sadhana, in the center is Lady Vasundhara, and then extending out in the four directions are the four jambalas, male deities. So white jambala in the front, yellow jambala to the right, red jambala to the back, black jambala to the left. So she is at the center, and these four jambalas attend to her. So the 4 years ago, around this time was when we first did this sadhana, practiced this sadhana. There are outer, inner, secret levels of the sadhana practice, and the innermost secret 4 levels in this sadhana. So we have had some taste of this Vasundhara practice. Very hopefully, 4 years ago when we practiced this sadhana, somewhere in my mind I'm thinking, because that was like pre-election. Obama finished 8 years, and so Hillary Clinton was on the Democratic ticket. I'm thinking, maybe, the Lord of the mandala of the United States is going to be a lady soon, 4 years ago, that did not happen. We know who got into the center of that mandala. Anyway, I'm digressing. Which is to say, why it sort of caught my attention that Vasundhara puja is coming up in Nepal is because of this interdependence from 4 years ago. So anyway, you all have a good start of the week, and let's dedicate the merit of this session of practice. Chanchu Semchu Rinpoche Ma Ge Ba Nam Ge Gyurji Ge Ba Nyam Ba Me Ba Yang Gong Ne Gong Du Bel War Sho.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Gracias.